Hello, everyone. Welcome in to the season finale of the Lock In podcast here in the LAS. It's me, KTL, here with my buddy Stray02. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good. Long season finally over. We just had our finale on Sunday. Yeah, it was Sunday, right? Yeah, it
Yep.
was.
So,
So our finale was Sunday. We'll go over all that. Obviously, the last time you saw us and about our opinions about everything was back before quarterfinals when we just got out of groups. So it's been a while. It's been like 4, 5 weeks, I think. But yeah, so we made it through. We're gonna do just a quick breakdown of how Grand Tournament went, and then we'll talk about the future for the next year. So overall, obviously, we are gonna talk about. Let's talk about quarters first. So quarters, I thought was the most not surprising part of Grand Tournament. There were a couple surprising like match results, but I think all the teams that I expected to win won. If you know what I'm saying. So like for those who don't know at home, Elysium beat Mint, but it was 3-2, so a lot closer than anybody thought. Just because of Mint's play going into out of groups, we didn't know what was going on with them. Rag 3-0 Tempest, which is nuts in my opinion. It's been 5 weeks. I still don't know what happened there. I really don't. um, Tag beat Gods 3-1s, even though God was the one seed. I think it was pretty expected. I think a lot of people expected that. And then B Team 3-0'd Warriors. Again, another match that I wasn't expecting to be that dominant, but it was due to some other circumstances. So we'll kind of go one by one around these series. So obviously, the closest series, Elysium versus Mint, went to 5 games. Actually, insane. What were your thoughts about like the that series overall?
I think this is finally we've had this hopium all season for Mint. We had these expectations from day one. They finally got a roster together. Um, I know they had a thought come in at support. I
Yep.
think that was huge for them. Some consistency on the roster, and they actually gave Elysium probably. I think Elysium even said themselves their toughest match of the Grand Tournament. So Um, kind of sucks. I would have loved to see Mint have a different opponent in quarters for sure to see how far they could have gone. But a very close match for the inevitable champion.
Yeah, it was super interesting because there's always that what if Mint had gotten to double a limb, how dangerous they could possibly be. Because they took, as you said, our eventual champion, hashtag spoilers, to 5 games. The closest, and I watched all those games back, they were all close. They weren't stomps, they weren't like one sided. The drafts were pretty even too. Just really, really even games. So it definitely felt like Elysium's toughest opponent. They got out of the way first before they could get into a double limb bracket, which was actually really good for Elysium, I think, in my opinion. Moving on over to Rag versus Tempest, it was not at all what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be the closest series of all of Grand Tournament, in my opinion, because it was two teams, you know, that were tournament favorites. They both had won their divisions in, their respective divisions and were looking really sharp in the group stage. Obviously, Tempest faltered against B Team, but we didn't know how much of that was just B Team evolving or was it Tempest not playing well. Turn it up. Tempest was just not playing well. Kind of just got smacked 3 games in a row by Rag. Any thoughts on that series overall?
Um, I do think that I know we had the conversation in the last podcast. I expected I said Tempest. I was pretty high on Tempest as well. I think just Rag, like the people that I gave them hopium for in the last one, I think they did step up. And I think just how Rag plays around Cinderace really kind of it hinders YouTube. I don't think YouTube was gapped because I don't think that's what happened at all.
Yeah.
But they limited YouTube's playmaking ability, and it kind of just tempers down a little bit. And I think Rag's botlane held it pretty well against Tempest, and very shocking 3-0. I expected at least I expected that get series to go 5 games regardless, but
Yeah.
we didn't get
I
to see it.
I obviously have a lot of insight when it comes to Tempest because they're all like I was formerly on the team, really good friends with them all, and I had a feeling Rag was gonna be hard for them because their best player is playing against Rag's best player, so YouTube can't get those leads that we normally see in his games. And then the supporting pieces from Ragnarok were just simply better, whether it's meta or play. I know Tempest, like um like mentally they were having so many blocks because of those games against B team, especially Tommy, right? Like Tommy was like the number one support we talked about going into LAS. Like he was ranked as like one of the highest ranked supports in our league, and he had a really big mental block of a series. Just didn't want to play enchanters. Was trying to only play playmaking. Ended up like costing their bot lane like 2v2 a lot. Gumi didn't have a good series at all. The top laner mismatched, tried to hold his own, but again, like was didn't have a really big defined champ pool at the time. So I just think the supporting cast was just better. And a lot of times in those series, when you're so evenly matched with your best players, it's gonna be about your supporting cast. So I definitely think Rag had a really clean series against Tempest, and I mean, as some of you guys who have already watched all of the games, they ended up being the third best team in all of LAS, right? So definitely shows that level of respect that Rag has and earned throughout the season, especially with I think massive prop goes to Gunny. I say it every time in broadcast when I'm casting the games. He was just so impactful for how that game team run, even with like a weaker ADC in peak in was it Peekaboo? Yeah, Peekaboo. Gunny was really holding his own in those 2v2 lanes where Peekaboo was kind of struggling, especially as we'll talk about later on in some of the later series that Rag played. But then they expect the next result was Tag Gods was the match that I played. Obviously you're coaching us. I would say it's pretty expected. I think Gods is a pretty one man team, similar to YouTube, but with worse pieces around him. And when Gimme isn't getting the champs that he's trying to get to 1v9, he's just not going to do it. And I think it was their jungle played a very easy to diagnose playstyle, which ended up costing them. The one game they won was because Gimme got Aurelia and had like a million kills. But overall, pretty expected series. I think the members of Tag played really well as a core, and we had really good shining pieces. Like Strangle had a really good series that series. Mike had a really good, or Hot Asian Girl had a really good series as well. Even JMaz had a really good series. Like JMaz had a really good Grand Tournament in general. Super consistent, really good player all of Grand Tournament. So I want to give my praise there to JMaz. I think he was really good all Grand Tournament, really well. But yeah, I think the match went as expected. Any other thoughts for that series?
Um, I can give my little in depth here. Obviously, I did the scouting for this one.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I think there's a little bit of there's like history between the gods and Peg, so um, there's a lot of history. I've never played against Pack in the jungle. This is my first time experiencing him.
Yeah,
We kind of noticed pretty quickly. I think we chatted about it in the Tag Discord about how like they're a very like they like to repeat play styles. They're very predictable. And it does come off of Gimgoon. Like they put a lot of focus into Gimgoon and draft and in just giving up resources. I will say I was a little shocked that they were going bot as much as they did,
yeah,
but but I will say that you and Fan actually like responded really well. And Hack's play style, which is to sacrifice his own gold to help others, kind of put him behind because we were just really well. And honestly, it's my bad. We should have 3-0'd, but I blinded Ferox,
yeah. It is what it
just
is. It happens.
not thinking about an
Yeah,
Aurelia. But
yeah. I mean, I do think Gods was, as you said, pretty. They weren't very proactive. I feel like a lot of their plays was being very reactive as a team, and then the only times they were being trying to be proactive is when like Pack is sitting in a lane for like 45 to 60 seconds trying to get the perfect gank off. And like that was really the only time he was really trying to be very proactive was when he's sacrificing his camps to try and get leads in his lanes. But outside of that, I think the series was pretty cut and dry. Another cut and dry series, which was so unbelievably boring, was B Team Warriors. Warriors just didn't show up, didn't have Kakal in there, and it showed. I mean, they couldn't draft, they couldn't play. They had Kabu playing top lane. He looked completely lost. The sub jungler Burger King looked pretty lost as well. It didn't really. We've always talked about through Warriors this entire season, where it was about Kabu and Kiru because Kabu enables what Kiru plays in the jungle. Couldn't really see that. Really struggle against a really ramping B team at that point in the season, and B team kind of just slaughtered them 3 games in a row.
Yeah, there. I was in voice with Colin during those games, and a lot of frustration on his end. Just a lot of things that like he said that they would normally uh, think about were not being thought about,
Hmm.
and it seems like they just kind of it happens. It's happened to me in draft where it's just kind of like things just you're trying to think so proactively that you actually just forget some like small detail, and then you're just like, oh well, I just hurt myself more than I needed to. It seemed like that kind of stuff happened, and like you said, B team did just turbo ramp up in this grand tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a coming out party for Tucci and for Albino, two players that weren't always looked at as main carries for the side of B team, had really good series. Especially Tucci kind of had his way with obviously a sub top laner in Kabu. He was mainly a jungler, but he kind of had his way, and Albino had his way with Kiru, who was someone who won MVP in that division, right? So overall, pretty weak performance for the Legends division. Both of their teams that made it out got eliminated pretty quickly. But overall, I do think it was a solid season for Warriors and for teams like Tempest, Gods, and Mint. I think Mint's always going to be the biggest question mark in my eyes because what could have been. Because if they just drew, that's why we talked about it going into the group stage, Brack. Right? When we talked about it in the previous podcast, you don't want to be a 2 seed. You want to be a 1 seed, and that's where not having their starters for their group stage games where they could have probably beaten if they were playing at that level against Elysium, they probably could have beaten Gods, and they probably could have been the 1 seed. It changes the entire bracket, right? So that's why you got to play your group. That's why the group stage games matter. They're BO1s, but they matter because not getting that 1 seed at the end of the day really hurt them. But then moving on into semis, it was I guess we're gonna call it winners semis. It was Elysium versus Rag and B Team versus Teg. This was a very unfortunate series for my health personally, but I mean, two different kinds of series. Elysium Rag, quick 3-0. It didn't look close. I remember we were like halfway through game 2 and the series was already over for Elysium and Rag. So it was a very quick showing for which Elysium, which is not surprising because in my eyes I didn't think so because I think Elysium just as we are talking about like, those other parts, not just mid lane, were so much better for Elysium, and especially when they had OP Killswitch playing jungle. It felt like he was really a big key for Elysium's run this season in the Grand Tournament. That he just unlocked so much of what they could do because it wasn't just we're playing tanks jungle. It's like we can play carries in jungle and we can have that X factor in the jungle. And then SG was playing, uh, um, Gwen and Kale and Aatrox and all these champs that like you don't normally see a lot of. And he kind of just they kind of had their way in that series, super quick 3-0 there. And then obviously B Team Tag 5 games, the complete opposite of the Elysium Rag. That series was horrible for me personally, for my health, because I had a really bad fever during that. But overall, what was your experience of the games on your end?
Yeah, I think the Elysium. I basically bought in pretty early that they were gonna be a finalist. Um, and the OP Killswitch coming in, they kind of leveled up their game from their loss to Moist in divisional playoffs.
Yeah.
And us versus B. Yeah, I think we had a little bit of a struggle. You were definitely a little out of it.
Yeah.
Not trying to take away credit from B team. I think B team's a good team. Um, but I think our momentum that we had from the previous week got dampened, and it's just nothing that we could have really done about it. It sucks, but we did put it to 5, which is I was very proud of you guys for that.
Some would say they did it to themselves by picking Timo, but
Yeah. No, they had some fun for a little bit.
Yeah, almost caught, almost. That's why you can't have too much fun sometimes, because sometimes it can bite you in the butt. They were lucky that didn't end up happening to them, but it almost did.
Yeah, I mean, but overall, it's a hard fought series,
Yeah.
and almost.
Yeah, and then moving on to then what was then the winners bracket final, and then the started playing some of the loser bracket games. Elysium played B team, was not competitive. It was a 3-0. It was Elysium once again flexing their muscles. That they were the team to beat, and they showed that. I mean, they 3-0'd tournament favorite Ragnarok. They 3-0 the up and coming superstar team, kind of having that DRX story with B Team, and they kind of throttled them. So that series was not close. The other series was also not close. With Ragnarok Tag was 3-1 in the favor of Rag. Really feel like they just had the number that series. Felt like all the momentum, as you said, kind of just died down towards the end of it. And I mean, yeah, it was just at the end of the day, the better team won, and that's where we saw Tech finish fourth in the bracket, and then it would set up Ragnarok versus B Team to see who was gonna make finals. And yeah, what were your thoughts of those two series?
Um, Obviously, I'll go back to the B Team Elysium. Oh no, I already covered that. The B Team versus Rag. I once again I had expectations that I expected to be a little bit closer. Honestly, I thought that with Cinderace versus the albino matchup would kind of tilt it in the other's favor. But I'm just gonna say this: this is the last two matches of the season, in my honest opinion, was the 2v2s in the bot lane. There was just B Team's bot lane pretty much railed Rag's bot lane. Um, and it was kind of unplayable.
Yeah, it was so curious too because Rag had to play with an E sub. I remember the first 3 games of the series, and they looked better with the E sub. No flame whatsoever to Rag starting AD, but they looked better with the sub, and they were only doing with 2 bans. They had 2 bans, and they looked better. And then obviously their starter comes back. They want to use their starter. Probably wasn't very warm, and and I thought also, which was something that Elysium ended up using in the final against B Team, was the pick of the Draven. I think Draven showed to be the kryptonite of B Team because a lot of what Sushi Wushi wanted to play in the bot lane was heavily countered by Draven. And the E sub for Ragnarok was a really good Draven player, and they had to waste a ban on Draven, or they gave the Draven up, and he just completely snowballed the game, right? So I think even though Rag didn't win that series, it did show that there was a formula to beating B Team's bot lane, in particular Sushi. Because I still think Color struggled all of Grand Tournament long, obviously, as someone who's role swapping, but they had a really good 2v2, as you said, in those last couple games to really bring that series back in their favor and get them to win it. Then in grand finals, it was the 2v2s, like you said. The games that Elysium won were over at level 2 because they just weren't respecting level 2, which is kind of simplistic, but it ends up biting you in the butt, especially when you're playing against 2 games against Draven, where Draven gets a kill level 2 and the whole game just completely falls apart from that point. Even in the last game, when I liked B Team's draft in their elimination game, they had Vayne Melia, which is scaling but also has good lane prio, and they just lose a 2v2 to its double scaling bot lane in the Jinx Tom Kench, and you just had that feeling after the 2v2 and they both die and no one from Elysium dies in that 2v2. I'm like, this game just feels over. And it kind of did. I mean, obviously, shout out to Tark for playing in those mid lane games for B Team. He played really well. Stepping in to play for Albino, who couldn't play the series, he played really well. Romeo came back in for Elysium to play the final for them because they didn't have their starting jungler because they just couldn't agree on a reschedule, and he played pretty well too. So both sub players ended up playing really well for their teams and were big catalysts as to, for Tark, he was the main catalyst as to why some of those games were even close. And then for the side of Romeo, really good job at shutting down the early game aggression from Unwanted Soul, which is like kind of been how B Team starts their games, is by Unwanted Soul having really unique gank paths and being able to snowball his laners. Romeo did a really good job of shutting that down, or just straight up punishing him for it, counter ganking or counter jungling, getting all of the neutrals. He was just farming every neutral in the game to the point where it just didn't even matter what Unwanted was really doing at that point. So it was still a competitive final. It wasn't the most competitive final, but it was. I still say it's more competitive than last season's final, so I'll definitely take it. We're going in the right direction, but yeah. What were your thoughts about the final overall?
Yeah, I think the bot lane 2v2, Elysium really just showed out. Um, Brother Otter, saw like him type about it. He was pretty nervous.
Yeah, he was definitely struggling.
He played a tough series. I mean, obviously he's a winner, so
Doesn't
I
matter.
mean he played great. He played great all season. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
he played great all season. He struggled against Tark. I think Tark subbing in, like you said, he was huge for that team. Uh, he laned very strong. He was a very strong laner. Just a few little minor mishaps outside of the lane phase, but overall, nothing but respect to Tark for coming in and filling in those shoes. And then, yeah, like you said, I think Romeo is really good at like neutralizing junglers.
Yeah.
That's kind of his what I remember from him playing in the regular season. It's a big neutralizer, and when you neutralize a strong early playmaker in Unlimited Soul, it makes it kind of hard to do much. And I think SG kind of also,
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. He neutralized. He tried to, right? Like he was playing. It was so interesting because I was really curious to see what was gonna happen in the meta within the series in the top lane because SG is known he can play tanks, but he's a very good carry player. Tucci had been playing pretty much exclusively carries all of Grand Tournament, so I was really curious to see what was gonna be the flow of the series. What who was gonna play what? Was the counter picks gonna matter? And Tucci was just slamming carry after carry after carry after carry, and SG's like, you can have him, bro. I'm gonna play Ornn. I'm gonna play Malphite. I'm gonna show up to team fights and be useful, and it made the difference.
yeah, I think just when you're able to neutralize those players that are kind of these big catalysts, Sushi, great grand tournament, you got beat 2v2. I went Soul, strong early game, neutralized by Romeo. SG neutralizes Tucci, who is also having a great grand tournament. It's really hard to play. I think Elysium, they knew what they had to do, and they executed on it.
Yeah, and again, big shout out to picking up the Draven champ. It was something that Vortex had played previously, but didn't really show the comfortability to just blind pick it. And he blind picked it a lot. In both games that he got it, he just blind picked it on blue side. He didn't care. Because he said, okay, Sushi, you want to play Vayne, you can't play Vayne into Draven. You want to play Ashe, can't really play Ashe into Draven. There were so many of these different champs that they just couldn't play because Draven got picked, and it really hurt with how the style that B team wanted to play in the bot lane. But so yeah, overall, big shout out to Elysium and to B team. Obviously, B team insane run. Just take a second. Coming from going 1-4 in regular season to winning one singular best of three in playoffs and going on that run. They had a big break in between their playoffs until the grand tournament started. They had about a month, and they really took that time seriously, and they got better. Obviously, I also think the meta really helped them, but they just took it and they ran with it, and they made it all the way from being basically not making Grand Tournament to going to second place in Grand Tournament's nuts. A huge shout out to them and their coaches, who I know who will probably watch this. And then obviously for Elysium, I would say big favorite early into the season. Kind of faltered, as you said, in playoffs. They were regular season champs. They lost in the playoffs, and then they came back and with a vengeance in Grand Tournament. So yeah, I think really well played by them. Cool to see them have their moment and take the crown. So yeah, that was our Grand Tournament overall. It was a really fun season. I had a lot of fun being a part of it, and look forward to being part of more moving forward now as we move forward 2024 as it's quickly coming upon us. I mean, Thanksgiving is literally in 2 days. I can't believe it. But let's get into business here. So our plans now for 2024, things will be a little bit different, obviously. There's gonna be Riot's already said there's gonna be 3 seasons or splits, which means we will have 3 seasons every year because we're gonna match that as LAS has intended to be like pro play. So we're gonna have 3 seasons to match the 3 splits in pro. We're still undecided what we're gonna do for a grand tournament. If we're gonna do them every split, every other split, we don't know yet because we just want to see the structure of the rank splits to see how long we have, right? And overall interest, because the amount of teams dictates how long our schedules are. But our general plan is this: we're gonna do an IBSG, which is Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold League, will be on Fridays. That will be the only league that plays on Friday. It's a new day that we're trying out to see if we can get interest in for those level of players on that day. Obviously, this could end up not happening because we might have enough interest. We tried to do something similar like this, and we just didn't have enough interest. So we're seeing if another day maybe makes it easier. So for some of these orgs, because I know there's a ton of orgs that always ask me about if we have a level. So we're gonna see if this happens. We're gonna be introducing also a Diamond League on Saturdays to be played on the same day as our draft league or our community league is what we call it. So the Diamond League will be Diamond League Diamond players from Diamond 4 to Diamond 1 with a Masters Exception player under 100 LP is going to be the cap for that player. And so that'll be really interesting to see. I've been asked so many times about Diamond League in the LAS, so that'll be the only paid league in the LAS. It's the only time we're going to ask for a full payment. Will be for that Diamond League because we want to make it a good prize pool for the teams, obviously. We're gonna be changing our community league from just a normal community league to a fearless draft league, which I'm really excited for. For those of you guys who don't know at home, fearless draft is essentially where what you pick 5 champs to ban and 5 champs to pick in your game. After game one, those champs you can't pick them anymore. They're gone essentially for the next game in the series. So it makes it really unique. It really helps people who have deep champ pools. So combining that and testing it with our draft league, which is already where you're gonna have your standard. Someone picks to be a captain, they're gonna draft the rest of the players on their team. I think it's gonna be really unique. So really excited to see how that works out. And then obviously still on Sundays, we're gonna have our Plat and Emerald leagues. So we're all our weekend will be busy. All of the days on the weekend will be extremely busy. We're going to be requiring teams to have a small deposit just so we can try and avoid teams dropping out. That's really all it's there for. It'll be fully refundable once the season ends, but it's just to protect us and to protect you guys as players and as teams to avoid having FFs because no one wants that. No one wants to have teams just randomly drop out. And then for so far, our plan is to bring back our preseason tournament. We couldn't do it for this season, but we want to bring it back for because we had it in season 6. So our plan is to have a preseason tournament on January 14th and to do the regular season on January 28th. That's our tentative dates. We're gonna iron those out and put an announcement in the Discord probably later this week or next week after Thanksgiving. And yeah, so those are some of our points for next season that we want to talk about so far. There'll be more things we talk about as we decide as a staff because we're having a big overhaul to how we're doing our staff. You know, for the outsiders who don't know, we have our staff is separated into 2 parts. We have managers and we have moderators. The managers are the ones that are going to be making all the decisions when it comes to how the leagues run, how we're doing vetting of players. All of that stuff will be done by managers, and the requirement is that managers can't play in the league. They have no stakes in the league whatsoever. It's just the best way for us to not have any bias whatsoever from anyone in that role. And then obviously our moderators will still be staff in the LAS who's willing to help us with doing other things, but they won't have overall control as to how the league is designed and ran. And they are obviously going to be allowed to play in the league, but just not have any major influence, we'll say, in the league. But yeah, that's all I have. Stro, any final thoughts here as we move forward to the end of the season?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, I'm excited for next season. I hope there's a big improvement. Obviously, we have a ton more players, ton more in the community, so I'm excited
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. But that's it for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next year for our start of the podcast and season 6 of the podcast. And yeah, hope everyone has a happy holidays, and we'll see you guys next year.